Hey, how's it going? Welcome to my channel. If you're new here, make sure you subscribe. So in today's video, I'm going to talk about this new ride that I have to fulfill the off-road riding that I like to do, the adventure riding, the backcountry discovery route riding that I like to do. And as much as we're all looking for the unicorn of motorcycles, they just don't exist. And what I decided to go with, which I'll show you here in a minute, there's a number of reasons that I'll go through why I chose this bike over some others. Now, based on the title, you already know it's a KTM, but is it the 390 Adventure, the 790 Adventure, the 790 Adventure R, or maybe even the 690? Well, stick around and you'll see which bike I chose to fulfill my missions of getting out and doing the off-road riding and the backcountry discovery route, riding and camping and fishing and all the things that I like to do out in the wilderness. Right, the exhaust is hot, so obviously the cover's not on there, so that is probably a giveaway if any of you have been looking at bikes and kind of know what it's going to look like. So here is what I decided to do. I went with the KTM 390. Not the 790 Adventure, not the 790 Adventure R, and definitely not the 690. So I'm going to go through the reasons, I've got 6 or 7, that led me to getting this bike, and also why I got away from riding the R1200GS, the BMW R1200GS off-road. I just couldn't afford to do the repairs. I wanted something that would be a little bit less expensive to maintain, and if things break, it'll be hundreds of dollars, not thousands of dollars. So we'll go through all the reasons why I have chosen this bike to take me on my adventures. One of the questions you may be asking is why the KTM 390 Adventure and not the 790 Adventure or the 790 Adventure R or even the 690? And it's a valid question, but in this bike, what I wanted something that was less expensive. And those bikes are almost twice as much as this bike is, which means repair costs are going to be more. And I really thought that was going to be more bike than what I wanted to do. I was trying to get everything down to a smaller package and definitely not have as much cost involved with it, and the cost of ownership, I wanted to reduce that after my experience with the R1200GS. So that is why I decided on the 390, one of the reasons why I decided on the 390 Adventure over the 790 Adventure, 790 Adventure R, and also the 690. In addition to that, with those other bikes, there's going to be a number of costs that come into getting them in what I would consider to be travel ready. For me, there's a number of things that have to be done, and the cost of doing it is just going to be added on to the cost of a bike that is nearly double what this is. Another reason I went with this bike is the weight. The wet weight of this bike is 380 pounds. That is almost 180 pounds less than what I was riding, which is a significant amount. And I wanted a bike under 400 pounds that I could still do off-road, that I could still do some touring, traveling, but that was lightweight. When I did a trip on a smaller bike a couple of months ago, it was so much more relaxing, not trying to plan ahead how to turn around a big beast. But on this bike, I could turn it around pretty much anywhere. No matter how steep the hill is, I'm pretty confident that I can handle this bike at this weight and get it turned around and not be worried about getting stuck somewhere. If I drop it, which eventually will happen, it'll be a lot easier to pick this up. And that was really kind of a motivating factor for me, was to go lighter and smaller. Right. So I just said that I wanted to go lighter and smaller, which also there are some other options. And really in the competing category that I thought would be competing with this is the BMW G310GS. And I was really interested in that bike, not in its base form, but because of the Rally Raid products. But then when I started adding up getting that bike, even buying it used, to get all the Rally Raid products put on that with the longer travel suspension and the wheels and things like that, it was going to be another $3,000. So I would be approaching the cost of this bike. And this bike has a few more features than what the BMW had, and then I'll talk about a couple of the other options that were out there and why I didn't choose those. But this bike had 11 more horsepower, 10 more horsepower than the BMW, and it has more features. It has a TFT screen, it has traction control, and it has ABS and lean angle ABS, which those are things that I like having. I know it's not for everybody, but a few extra added safety features is something I like having on a bike. So that was one of the reasons I chose this over the BMW. I have never owned a KTM, so I thought this would be a good introduction into that. There's already a lot of KTM power parts, aftermarket parts, so I can get to customize it myself. And I've already started doing some things to make it fit me a little bit better, and there'll be some follow-on videos about doing that. So that was one of the reasons I wanted this, is it has more power than some of the others in the category and has more features than others in the category, to include even a quick shifter on what is considered an entry-level bike. I spent a lot of time thinking about what I wanted in a lighter, more compact, and more affordable motorcycle. And of course the DR650 popped up, and so did the KLR 650. I had a KLR 650, I don't know, 10, 15 years ago, and it was fine for getting around, but there were certain aspects that I really didn't like. And then with the KLR 650, same with the DR 650, to get it to be more ready for travel, it's still going to take more work. And those bikes only have 5-speed transmissions, so they run into some speed limiting factors. I live in the Southwest. It is wide open here. There are roads that are straight as far as the eye can see. Speed limits to be 70, 75 miles an hour aren't uncommon. And my experience with the KLR before was it really struggled because of that. This bike has a 6-speed transmission, so that it almost has an overdrive, and at 65 miles an hour, the RPMs are right around 5,500. So it has plenty of range to hit interstate speeds if I need to do that for short stints. And I wanted it to be a little bit more comfortable for touring type traveling. My opinion is this can do it a little bit better than the KLR DR. There's some other things that go with that. Those have longer travel suspension, 21-inch front wheel. Yeah, that's true. But for the type of riding that I do, I don't really notice those kinds of differences. Would it make it better? Yes. But I wanted to try something different. All right, I talked about wanting lightweight for trail riding, picking it up, and just something that's a little bit easier to manage off-road. But one of the other reasons I wanted something that was lightweight is if I have to go somewhere and I've got to drive for some reason, I could put this bike on a hitch mount motorcycle carrier and take it across the country if I needed to. If I had a trip for work, I could take this bike with me, where my bigger bikes, I wouldn't be able to do that without trailering them. So there's a bit of a convenience factor to being able to throw this on a rack and taking it anywhere. And if I have all my luggage with me, I can pull it off, throw the luggage on, do weekends if I am traveling somewhere for work. So that was something that I considered when looking for lightweight functionality and things that I could do with this bike. These bikes right now seem to be super popular. It took me a couple months to find one. The dealers that I was talking to, some of them were sold before they even uncrated them and built them. I anticipate that the aftermarket products for this are really going to explode. I know Black Dog Cycle Works, on their webpage, they show that they're coming up with a skid plate for this. And then I also, SW Motec has a skid plate that they've came out with this, some travel luggage, some racks, and there's different foot pegs that are coming out. So there's a lot of things that are coming out with this bike, and I like that idea of kind of being on the front end and being able to see how things get developed and kind of do some things on my own. There's a lot of parts available for it right now. I can't get a skid plate because they are marketed, but they are not being manufactured. It will eventually happen. I have some ideas that I'll talk about in a later video. Some of the parts from the 790s can be adapted to this bike, and then also some of the parts from the Duke, the 390 Duke, can be adapted to this bike. So it has a little bit of versatility between both bikes depending on what you want to do. And I'll talk about that in future videos regarding the windscreen and foot pegs and levers and things like that. All right, you might be thinking that, yeah, everything I've said sounds great, but there are definitely some limitations to this bike, and I plan on finding out what some of those limitations are. I'm not fooling myself in some of the things that will need to be addressed at some point. It has cast wheels. KTM says they've engineered them to be stronger, but the reality is, in hardcore off-roading, they break. They can be considered brittle over spoke wheels. KTM has said that they're planning to come out with a spoked wheel for this bike. So in the next 6 to 9 months, hopefully that'll be the case. If not, I'm pretty confident there will be aftermarket options for spoked wheels. So yes, that is something that I'll have to take into consideration riding early on. Ground clearance on this bike is at 8 inches, so it's not a lot of ground clearance compared to a lot of the newer, more off-road bikes, off-road focused bikes are. But with this being 8 inches, the F800GS I was riding, that it only had 8 inches of clearance itself. With the alt-rider skid plate, it lowered it down, so that was 8 inches of clearance on that bike. Suspension travel isn't as long of suspension travel as you're going to see on more off-road focused bikes. It's 6.7 inches in the front, 7.1 in the rear. Now, with that being said, unlike a lot of other bikes, this is a fully adjustable suspension. The front has compression, dampening adjustments, and rebound dampening, and in the back it has rebound dampening along with preload. So my opinion is that a well-sprung 7 inches of travel is going to feel a lot better than 10 inches of wallow, mushy, soggy travel. So my hope is that this will be perfectly fine for the type of riding that I do. If I find there's some limitations, I have a few ideas of what I can do to improve the suspension, which I don't want to give it away now because that'll likely be something that I do in the next 6 to 9 months, converting it to a little bit more off-road, friendlier off-road worthy travel bike. Now, my plan for this bike is more for myself, to prove to myself that I can do everything on this bike that I did on my R1200GS. I can do 400 or 500 miles a day on this bike if I choose to, and I can go do 150, 200 miles of off-road on this bike like I did on the GS. That's what I'm going to do over the next couple of years, is take this, go do the off-road, go, if I've got to do a lot of touring to get to off-road, do that as well. So continue to watch these videos, see how things unfold. I have some modifications that I've already started doing to this bike, and I'll put some videos together on that because I know there's a lot of questions. This is a new bike out on the market, and people are wondering how to modify things and get it more ergonomically set up for them. So those will be things that I am doing. I hope you found this a little bit informative and hopefully a bit intriguing to see what happens with this bike, and maybe it's got you thinking about maybe what you should be riding as well, and whether or not you need a massive adventure bike, especially if you do a lot of off-road, or would something smaller and lighter like this serve all of your purposes, meet your needs, still keep it fun, still keep it interesting, and maybe take a little bit of the nervousness and pressure off when you are doing that off-road riding. So let me know what you think in the comments. If you have any questions about this bike now that I've had it, I'm going to try to get the 600 miles knocked out in the next week so that I can get the oil changed and get it ready to go. And just your thoughts on switching to different bikes. I'm always curious what other people are thinking and why they choose the bikes that they have. So thanks for watching, and I will see you out there.